Part 7. The decision nobody saw coming. The morning after my lunch with Jennifer, I woke up feeling different. Not happier. Not less hurt. But clearer. For months, I had been living inside confusion. Inside doubt. Inside questions. Now I finally had answers. Not all of them. But enough. Enough to understand where I stood. Enough to understand where my children stood. And enough to decide what happened next. I made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table. And looked around the room. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor. The same floor David had installed himself. Every corner of the house held memories. 43 years of memories. And suddenly I realized something important. The house wasn't the issue. Not really. The issue was choice. My choice. The choice everyone else seemed eager to take away. That afternoon, I met with Robert again. He greeted me with the same calm expression he always wore. But this time, I didn't bring questions. I brought a decision. I want to update everything. He raised an eyebrow. Everything? Everything. The will. The estate documents. The healthcare directives. The trust. All of it. For years, David and I had assumed our children would eventually inherit everything equally. It seemed natural. Normal. Expected. But expectations change when trust changes. Robert listened carefully. Then asked a question. Are you doing this because you're angry? I thought about it. For a long moment. Then I shook my head. No. Because anger fades. Decisions made from anger often become regrets. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. And clarity lasts. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed documents. Page after page. Signature after signature. By the time we finished, my future looked very different. Much different than my children expected. And that was intentional. Because for the first time in years, my future belonged entirely to me. A week later, I made another decision. One nobody saw coming. Not Jennifer. Not Michael. Not even Robert. I contacted a local scholarship foundation. A small organization that helped students from struggling families attend college. David had volunteered with them years ago. He believed deeply in education. In opportunity. In helping people build better lives. I still remembered something he once told me. If you ever have the chance to change someone's future, take it. At the time, I hadn't realized how important those words would become. Over the next month, I met with the foundation several times. Quietly. Privately. Without telling anyone. The conversations felt surprisingly meaningful. For the first time in a long while, people weren't interested in my property. Or my age. Or my future care arrangements. They were interested in my ideas. My goals. My values. Who I was. It felt refreshing. It felt human. Meanwhile, Jennifer and Michael continued behaving as though nothing had happened. Which almost made it worse. No apology. No honest conversation. No acknowledgement. Just polite phone calls. Careful smiles. And endless pretending. Pretending everything was normal. Pretending trust hadn't been broken. Pretending I hadn't learned the truth. Christmas came and went. Then New Year's. Then winter settled heavily over the town. Months passed. And during those months, I noticed something. Neither Jennifer nor Michael asked what I wanted. Not once. They continued discussing plans. Suggestions. Options. Ideas. But never desires. Never dreams. Never choices. Mine. It was as though they had unconsciously stopped seeing me as the author of my own life. And that realization hurt more than any argument could. One evening, while sorting through old photographs, I found a picture of David standing beside our first house. We were young. Broke. Laughing. The house was tiny. The roof leaked. The paint was peeling. And we couldn't have been happier. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Then I noticed something written on the back. David's handwriting. A note he'd scribbled decades earlier. A home is never about the building. It's about the people who respect what happens inside it. I sat there for nearly an hour after reading that sentence. Because suddenly everything made sense. The house wasn't sacred because of its walls. It was sacred because of the life we'd built there. And respect was part of that legacy. Without respect, everything else became meaningless. In early spring, Robert called. The paperwork is finalized. I thanked him. Then drove to his office. When I arrived, he handed me a folder. Inside were the completed documents. Legally binding. Official. Done. There would be no misunderstandings later. No confusion. No debates. My wishes were clear. Extremely clear. As I prepared to leave, Robert smiled. You seem lighter. I laughed softly. Because he was right. For the first time since David's death, I felt lighter. Not because my problems had disappeared. Because I had stopped allowing other people to define my future. That changes a person. More than most realize. A few weeks later, Jennifer called. Mom, we're having a family dinner next Sunday. Family dinner. The phrase almost made me smile. Almost. Will you come? I thought for a moment. Then answered. Yes. Because I knew something she didn't. I knew that dinner would be different. Very different. Because by then, my decision would already be in motion. And once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same again. As I ended the call, I looked toward the living room. Toward David's old chair. The chair nobody had sat in since he died. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Not because the situation was easy. Not because the future was certain. But because I finally remembered something important. I was still the woman David married. Still strong. Still capable. Still independent. And very soon, my children were about to discover that for themselves. End of Part 7. Part 8. The final Thanksgiving. The shocking family confrontation, the reading of the documents, and the emotional ending that changes everyone's lives forever.